All right, good afternoon. Yes. Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to K-12 Education Budget. There we are, live and in stereo. Committee, we are currently, well, before we proceed, yesterday I forgot to ask for a motion to approve minutes for February 14th, February 15th, February 16th, February 17th. I see Representative Hubert would like to make that motion.
So moved.
And a second. All right, we got a wide awake committee today. So seconded by Thomas. And discussion. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, Holly, we got that done. All right, so committee, we left off yesterday. We have had House Bill 2512, this substitute, open for almost a week now. And so we are going to take that up. So I will open for amendments. Representative Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a conceptual amendment. I would like to move the threshold from 60% to 65%. I represent a district that's at 62.5, and they would take a substantial portion of this money, so I feel the need to put up a bit of a fight for them. So,
do we have a second? And let's reference that. So we're looking at 2512, and we're talking specifically about the Math Nation item. And the threshold for schools that will be participating in funding Math Nation, which is up to 4 million, 3 to 4 million, would be those students that have, or any district that has students, total students that average falls below 60%. So 60% or more of their students are in the lowest two categories of proficiency. And so you are suggesting changing that to 65.
yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. Did we have a second on that? Owsley. Representative Owsley is second. Discussion. Representative Estes.
That's actually something I've been thinking about a lot, especially since our conversation yesterday when we got to different numbers of districts that qualify. In my mind, the whole reason that we're going here and doing this is we're very concerned about how students are doing. I would actually offer a substitute motion that we change that number to 50%, because I have a difficult time in my mind letting a district where half of the students are not a level 3 and 4 not be part of this. My hope and dream is we get all students to a 3 and 4, and I think we need to be more aggressive and help school districts get there.
All right, so we're moving, the substitute motion is to move from 60 to 65 back to 50%. If you have 50% that are not proficient, then you would be part of this funding. Is there a second? Representative Penn seconds the motion. Substitution is in order, and now discussion on the motion. You may close, Representative Estes.
I close my motion.
Okay, committee, you have heard the motion to change the number or the threshold to 50% for the Math Nation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And opposed? Motion carries. Okay, Representative Estes.
Thank you. While we're here, yesterday I was working on a bundle of amendments, kind of come to the conclusion on what's feasible and not feasible. We just took care of the 50%. I appreciate the committee's help on that. One other change that I would like to use is when we measure this, and in that same line on page 12, line 5, when you talk about which shall be used by unified school districts that had 50% or more of such district students. What I'd like to do is strike such district students and put in the district's students enrolled in grade 3 through 12. We had some questions about that, and I thought it made sense to add some clarifying language. The other change that I have is where we say the virtual math program, change that to the Math Nation program. And then on line 17, says during the school year 2022 to 2023 is determined by the above agency on the number of, and I'd like to insert attendance centers and students. So between number of and students, add attendance centers. And what I'm looking there is, I think we're spending a lot of money, and I want to make sure that we have meaningful ways that we can compare data and being able to break down, not only through the districts, how much this is getting used by the attendance centers, as well as how many students, and looking at how the buildings in the districts' state assessments change, hopefully positively because of this. I think that change helps us to track information better. Then the last change I have is line 22. The Committee on Education will also include, and I want to insert a list of the school districts and attendance centers that are using Math Nation. And I'll stop that at there. And that's the entirety of my amendments.
Okay, do we have a second? Representative Huber, and then we have some questions. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanting to make sure, you said 3 through 12, is that what you said?
7 through 12.
Oh, okay, I thought you said.
If I misspoke, I'm sorry. I'm a little bit dyslexic sometimes.
Okay.
Self-teach or
7 through
diagnosed,
12.
7
Okay.
through 12.
All right, thank you.
Okay, and you went through a lot of basic changes, but let's look at it. It's on our 22 RS 3623, and it's on page 12, and that's what you're referencing. So let's just take a moment and walk us through. If everybody has that from yesterday, you can pull it out and make sure that we all understand the amendment. So if you would proceed one more time and walk us through from the top to the bottom.
Okay. On line 5 and 6, the end of line 5 says, such district's students, I'd like to strike that and replace that with the district students enrolled in grades 7 through 12. And if you think it's easier to handle these one at a time, we could do that if that's your pleasure.
No, just go slowly so that Nick gets it all. I think he probably has it all. He's good, just for our benefit.
Certainly. All right. On certain areas, on line, several different lines, we use the phrase virtual math program. I would like to strike that and replace it with the Math Nation program. Okay, then line 17, between number of and students, insert attendance centers and. On line 22, insert between include and a list of the school districts and attendance centers that are using Math Nation. And I'm sorry, I left one out. I'm glad you made me slow down. On line 23, strike the word schools. Replace it with school districts and attendance centers, which goes back to my desire to make sure that we have multiple ways that we can compare and measure if what we're doing is having the desired impact.
Okay, we have all of the changes. Nick, yes.
If I could just clarify one point to make sure I've got it correct. This would move the level that districts, the proficiency level for students enrolled in grades 7 through 12 in districts that are at 50%, If they don't have a 50% proficiency, they would be using the program. These districts would also be funding the program, correct?
Correct. I'm not changing any of those parts of the bill.
Based on the number of students in grades 7 through 12, not the entire FTE of the school district itself.
Correct.
Thank you.
And Representative, did you say something about may use versus must use?
I was going to handle that second because I didn't know how complicated, because that really began with a question in my mind.
Okay.
I can handle it now if we want to just have one vote, or what's your pleasure?
Yes, go ahead and ask the question, and then you can determine whether or not you want to include that, and we'll update your motion.
On line 14, we use the word may. And I really am debating in my mind whether that word should be a must or a shall.
And I think we're going to ask you, Nick, does it have the same effect, or is a shall appropriate for intention?
So in that line, you notice that that specific provision of the proviso does state that the fee shall be paid by the district, and then goes on to say from the monies of the district that may be used for that purpose. So it is requiring districts to pay for the program, but that may is simply saying of the monies that may be used for that program, presumably general fund monies.
So we could leave that then. Representative Estes, is that your desire?
I'll leave it alone for now. Thank you.
Okay. We are open for discussion. Yes, Representative Nguyen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And could you repeat where you had attendance centers and students?
Line 17, at the end of the line, it says number of. I would insert attendance centers and in front of students.
Oh. So is there any other place in this vision you're going to identify attendance centers?
Basically, when Math Nation was in front of us, they said they have the ability to generate usage reports. In my mind, we're going to try this, we're going to see how it works, and we're going to make decisions in the future whether or not to fund it. I want to do everything I can to be responsible and make sure that we fully measure it every way possible so that we can compare. I think that some districts will use it more than others. Some buildings may use it more than others, and I want to be able to compare how can we see a difference in state assessment scores in those buildings, and did that make a difference? If a district or a attendance center has a great gain and they were a high user of Math Nation, that tells us it was good. If that doesn't happen, if we have no gains, but we can see that that district or that attendance center used it a lot, that's going to tell me what I want to know about whether I want to use Math Nation in the future. I really am just trying to gather as much information after we do this to see if this is something that worked and whether we should use it in the future.
So you could potentially have an attendance center with X amount of students in those grades, a different X amount of students performing, and you're trying to compare the two?
If we're able to do that, I would like for us to be able to do that.
I don't think your logic is correct, but that's my logic is not your logic. So, you know what I'm suggesting? If you have an attendance center here, you're identifying students who are not performing.
So here's my
No,
logic.
answer that question for me, please. You have the attendance center, so you're identifying students who are not performing, right? And they're using Math Nation, correct?
I'm looking at it globally. If we, through the longitudinal studies, have the ability to look at a district.
Okay, no.
We
don't go
also
all
have
that.
the
Just
ability,
start
I'm
here with my
speaking,
logic.
I am speaking.
Here's
We
your-
also have the ability to look at attendance centers, look at buildings, and see how they're performing. If Math Nation can tell us not only how districts did, but how building centers did, and we can look at whether or not there were high or low usage, I find that to be very helpful information.
What I'm asking you, though, you have an attendance center here, the building, correct? Mm-hmm. And the individuals in that building are using Math Nation. Give you any X amount number you want. Got that?
High or low?
Now, here's a district, what are you saying? Attendance center, and then number of students? So where's this body, where's this number coming from? Total number in the district? You know where this is a finite number. Those students not performing in that building. Now, you said attendance center and students? Where's this number coming from? Students in the district?
I do believe that we know how many students are in each building in each grade level. Your question doesn't make sense to me, but, so I'm trying.
I'm asking what you're comparing. And I'm not saying you can't compare the numbers. I don't believe you that the numbers are what are comparable. I'll put it like that. You can identify the numbers in this building and those students who perform at X level, and that's a number. Am I correct? Are we there?
Like I said, I'm looking for a global number. When I look at an attendance center or a district, I want to know, when I look at their state assessment, did they have high or low usage of Math Nation? That's all I'm saying.
That's a number. Because the only ones are the only ones you're testing, all of them, or testing the one that didn't perform at a certain level?
You were muffled on the last end of your question. I didn't
Who
hear.
are you testing in this attendance center? All of them?
Every child who takes the state assessment. I'm talking about using state assessments to compare. And when I look at state assessment, I would also like to look at whether there was high or low usage in that attendance center as well as the district.
And yes, no problem. Representative Estes, this piece that we're discussing on line 17 is related to participating districts that shall track and report. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to understand how attendance centers are doing based on their state assessment after they have implemented and used Math Nation. Some may implement and use it at higher levels, and since they have to provide a couple times twice a year a report on how they're doing, that's what you're looking at to see how schools are implementing it by looking at their test scores. So Representative Wen, did you have a question?
No, I had a comment. That is not the way you presented that you wanted to compare the numbers. That is not what you said.
I think that's what's in the bill. I'm just reading the bill.
I'm just responding to what Representative Estes is saying. She wanted to compare numbers. And I'm just suggesting those numbers are not, what she just repeated is not what the way you explained that you want to compare the numbers. So we'll see. So thank you. We can talk.
All right, committee, we have a motion. Is there more discussion? Representative Hoy.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for the reviser. What is the significance, could you explain what changing virtual math program to Math Nation program does to the bill, please?
It would just specifically name the Math Nation program in that proviso.
Thank you. So the way it currently is now, could it apply to existing programs that are already being used and contracts that school districts already have without that language change?
I would say the way it is now, the way it was first proposed, this would be requiring KSDE to fund a new implementation of a math program. So with the notion of the committee's will to do the Math Nation program. So probably the way it is now, I think it would capture the Math Nation program alone, but this would specifically clarify that this is the Math Nation program that would be implemented.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, Representative Estes, you may close.
I close my motion.
All right, committee. All those in favor of the Estes motion, say aye. Aye. And opposed? Motion carries. All right, committee, opening back up for any other, we have Representative Hoffman for.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to look at House Bill 2615, and I want to just specifically take Section 18, which is the Learn Everywhere provision, and move that into House Bill 2512. Just Section 18 of 2615, which is the Learn Everywhere provision.
Is there a second? Representative Thomas. Open for discussion. Representative Hubert and then Representative Tarwater.
Could you explain more what that one section is and clarify that for me?
Yeah, the Learn Everywhere is the one where you can go out and learn from other areas around, say like you're going to work at a shop somewhere, and you can get credit through working at that shop. That's the basic principles of the Learn Everywhere.
Okay. I was just trying to remember in my mind, and that reminds me. So
Alternative education opportunities.
Okay.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative, we had discussions about setting a certain date on those. And I believe that there's a balloon amendment also that would set a certain date, certain.
It should be in there, though, already.
On the open enrollment bill?
No, this is not open enrollment. This is only the Learn Everywhere. I'm simply taking the Learn Everywhere out of 2615 and putting it in not the open enrollment, ESAs, nothing else that's in that.
Representative Tarwater, we will do open enrollment separate.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on this? Was there a second? Yes, Thomas was the second. Okay. Any further discussion? All right. Representative, you may close.
I close.
Committee, all those in favor of the Hoffman Amendment, please say aye. Aye. And opposed? Motion carries. All right, any other items for House substitute for House Bill 2512? Representative Penn.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I have an amendment. I think Holly has it to pass out at the appropriate time, whereby I'd like to move the tax credit for low-income students for the scholarship. That whole amendment would like to change the eligibility of it from 6 years to 7 years.
Is there a second? Representative Thomas. Okay, you may explain your amendment, or you may ask the reviser to explain for you.
Well, very briefly, Madam Chair, this is a quick cleanup amendment to what we already passed during COVID and due to COVID. A lot of parents kept their kids out of school for about a year. They were at home, so that when they took their kids back to enroll the following year, they were no longer 6 years old for the eligibility. So this just gives us an opportunity for them to capitalize on that missed opportunity to apply for that tax credit scholarship.
Question, Representative Landwehr.
So are we sure that 7's the right number and not 8?
Speaking my language, I'd love it to be as expansive as possible, but age 7 is the legal requirement age for the state of Kansas when a child must be enrolled in school. So this helps align all of those lines as well.
Okay, yeah, I was just wanting to make sure that we were making sure that all the kids were eligible that could be.
Yes, ma'am. And I received information that there were about 20 kids in Wichita diocese and about 20 in the Salina diocese that didn't have the opportunity to get this credit. So we have some kids right now who are missing out on that private education because they couldn't apply for that tax credit and that scholarship. So we want to make sure that they can attend as well.
All right, Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Penn, did you have some statistics for Kansas City, Kansas by chance?
No, I didn't have any on KCK. I do apologize, but.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Any further discussion? You may close on your amendment.
Madam Chair, I close.
Committee, all those in favor of the Penn amendment, say aye. Aye. And opposed? Motion carries. Committee, we are back on the bill. Substitute for House Bill 2512. There are no other amendments. You may close. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would close on the substitute for House Bill 2512.
All right, committee. All those in favor for the substitute for House Bill 2512, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. Committee, we have our first bill that we have wrapped up. Took us a few days to get that accomplished. Committee, what is your will on, let's see here, House Bill, substitute for House Bill 2615. This is the open enrollment. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to take House Bill 2615 and remove the contents of Section 18 since we put it in the other, and then also remove the contents Section 1 through 17, which will just leave Sections 19 through 25 in House Bill 2615, which is the open enrollment. And then there is an additional balloon that needs to be put into that.
Let's go ahead and take the first motion. Is there a second? Representative Tarwater, I looked over here first, but Representative Tarwater and discussion. Representative Tarwater.
Yeah, my apologies, Madam Chair. I thought his previous motion was to move Section 18 through 25 into that other bill, and so that's where my confusion came in. But yeah, we do have a balloon amendment that would help with the open enrollment, and if we could pass that out.
I don't know what we're doing.
If you want, I'll just add this balloon amendment to my motion. That way it'll make it simpler, and you can go ahead and explain the balloon amendment.
Well, that's quite all right.
Okay, let's do that. If that's okay with the second.
Yes, he was the second.
Let's see. So in a gist, this delays this by 1 year to give schools a chance to plan for it. And it also gives a deadline of, I think, September 19th or 20th, I believe, September 20th. So no students can transfer after that.
Madam Chair, can I please get a repeat? We're on sub for HB 2615. We took out Section 18, but then it's what sections?
So, yes, 19 through 25.
Thank you.
The contents just contain the open enrollment, and the motion was expanded to include the balloon amendment that was offered by Tarwater. Any items, Nick, do you want to, did we miss anything on this?
Committee, I just, real fast, running through this balloon amendment, you will see Section 18 appears in this balloon amendment, but that has, as you know, since been included in the budget bill. So disregard Section 18 on pages 10 and 11. That will not be included in House Bill 2615 if this amendment passes. I will also note, with the removal of that section, I will need to update some section references in there, so those section references to Section 3 will need to be changed as well. But the gist of this amendment is, as Representative Tarwater said, the provisions of the Open Enrollment Act would not go into effect until July 1 of 2023, with the caveat that rules and regulations and the policies, not rules and regulations, the policies that are put forth by school districts to adopt their capacity limits would need to be implemented and in place by January 1st of 2023. So those policies have to be adopted prior to the bulk of these provisions taking effect. The other change, as Representative Tarwater noted, is mainly on page 16. This would state that students who submit transfer applications prior to September 20th, so prior to the funding count date of the school year, would be required to be accepted by a school district unless that student or those students exceed the capacity limits. So the key date would be September 20th, and then in that second balloon bigger balloon on page 16 that you see, a school district could continue to allow a non-resident student who submits a transfer application to transfer after September 20th, but would not be required to. Then that would be subject to their policies and procedures that they adopt. I will note there is a date here that on page 17 that school districts would be required by September 1st of each year to determine the number of non-resident students the district has the capacity to accept in each grade level for each school of the school district. So that capacity determination would have to be made by September 1st of each year, and then students would be submitting their applications for transfers, and transfers again would have to be accepted based on capacity limitations prior to that September 20th count date. And I believe that covers it, Madam Chair, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
All right, Representative Tarwater, would you like to further explain any of these items?
Yeah, if you recall, I made a motion last time to allow the district to decide how many students in each grade. This would allow them to not accept them after the cutoff date, so that they could, if they're not going to receive funding, they can't take the kid unless they want to. It just doesn't force them to take them after that cutoff date. I did have a question, though.
Go for it.
Okay, so they have to submit by the 1st of September the capacity in each grade. Can applications for admission be sent in before September, or after they state the capacity, is there only 20 days for people to respond?
And Representative, we were just talking about that. I think that September 1 is too late, and maybe that should be August 1, that they need to set the capacity before enrollment's over, because that gives students the opportunity we don't want them leaving one district. We'd rather them start in that district. Is that kind of where you were heading?
Right.
Okay. Would August 1 instead of September 1 be a better date?
It would. Okay.
So this is an amendment on Hoffman, and he's okay with it, and you second it, so we're still good.
Yep.
Open for discussion. And okay, Representative Hoffman, then Representative Byers. And I do think we kind of need to re-talk about this. I see some confused looks, so let's make sure everybody's on the same page.
Nick, I was just wanting to go above that paragraph above that, it talks about October. I guess it seems like to me that on the first day of October, superintendent shall file with the state board that includes the names of the students granting transfer, but if, and maybe it's the year before, but if we're not, if they, okay, maybe that's okay, because then in August, it just came before the other. So in August, they decide, and then in October, they, okay, I think we're okay then. I just had to think about that a little bit.
Anything to add on that, Nick?
Certainly. So yes, with this, I presume friendly amendment to August 1st, districts would have to determine their capacity for that school year by August 1st. Students would have the ability to transfer and would be required to be accepted by districts until that September 20th based on capacity limitations. And then districts would be reporting those transfer numbers on the first day of October. And then if I will mention one more thing that I forgot to mention in the balloon, if you look right above where Representative Hoffman was talking about, that stricken language there, it appears in just black stricken language. That strikes out the allowance that a student could transfer no more than 2 times per year. So this would, under this bill or under this amendment, it would be contemplated that the transfer would only happen 1 time.
Okay. Representative Byers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is this. If we have a district that does this and then they are at capacity based upon transfers that come in, what happens if a family moves in between that August 1st, September 20th deadline that actually lives in the attendance area? Does the school make space for them? Does the school ask students to leave who previously were accepted on special transfer? What's the plan if that should occur?
I think the bill gives allowances. It says for those that are transferred, and then they have to have a capacity for those that live in the district. So Nick can follow up on that and see if I interpreted that correctly.
So the language of the bill doesn't specifically speak to that, but districts would have to come up with their policies and procedures to determine how they're going to determine their capacity limitations for each school year. So I presume within that process, districts could establish certain methods to determine how to determine capacity if they're getting an influx of students or if they've traditionally have an influx of students.
Let me follow up on Representative Byers' question on that. So then it's allowable for the district to have a policy that allows transferable students versus students that might move into the district. Is there anything in the bill that would prohibit that?
No, there's not. So capacity limits would be set by the districts.
Okay.
So in essence, a district can provide a buffer, so to speak, so they can absorb any, we know that there's a lot of times corporations move people around, and we've seen it in Wichita a number of times. You can all of a sudden have an influx of families that come in that on the corporate's time and not necessarily on school time. So I just want to make sure that those capacities are there.
Yep, good. Representative Wynn.
I have a question for Nick, please. Thank you. Nick, can a student, is there anything in the language here that says that the district must provide the answer to the student's request before September 20th? And the context for that question is that if the student seeks transfer, it is denied September 20th, are they then registered in any school? If they go back to their other school, homeschool, previous homeschool, they have missed the September 20th deadline. So are they counted any place?
So there are provisions in here for if a transfer request is denied by a school district, then there's an appeal process that can happen. Regarding whether a student is sitting out of school waiting on a transfer application, the bill doesn't contemplate that. I would presume the student would be going to school.
Right, so I'm not assuming the student will sit out. They will then go to some school, but they are not, they did not meet that September 20th deadline. So the funding, how do they, the school district that then they land on, do they receive funding?
No, so if a school district is allowing a student to transfer into the district after September 20th, it's kind of, would be kind of status quo.
It's almost not a transfer in. They are, that's their home district. They were transferring to another. Since they were denied there, they are now home. But they weren't present September 20th. They weren't thinking they were going to be present. They were present. They were denied.
Yeah, so in any situation, if a student is not attending and enrolled in a district on September 20th, that district would not receive funding under the school finance formula for that student for the respective year.
Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do understand what Representative Nguyen is saying. So if, on page 12, if we say that September 20th is the final day that they can accept them, I guess. So would it be anticipated that they would decide before September 20th? Because I think what she's saying is if they wait until September 20th and then all of a sudden they say, no, we're not going to take you, then that student is not enrolled in any schools because they haven't enrolled in the school that they were in. So do we need to put something in there that gives that buffer, or?
Nick, you can respond, and then I'll just throw out an opinion. The school board has to create the policy for it. They have to establish what happens if you get a student that makes an application and we do not receive it until September 20th. I would also think that the language, is it saying that the school could certainly accept after the 20th, they just wouldn't receive funding after the, correct? It's just that it's actually September 29th. They wouldn't, if they didn't have that student submitted to the Department of Education by September 29th or October 1st, then they would not receive any funding. However, this bill is saying you're not required to take anyone after the 20th. Is that correct?
Yes, so before September 20th, applications have to be based on the capacity limitations. So students would be allowed to transfer to a district based on the capacity limitation of that district, and applications under the bill would be taken in the order that those applications are received. But then after September 20th, the count date that determines funding for that, essentially that school year or the next school year, a school district could accept students to transfer, but doesn't have to. That's kind of it would continue the status quo that's currently used now.
But isn't it September 29th, or is it September 20th?
The count date is September 20th.
It is, okay. I don't know why I had September 29th in my head. Okay. Any other questions? You're not sure? Okay, Representative Hoffman.
Yeah, I understand, Madam Chair, I understand that, but if they didn't enroll in, let's say they went to school A in one year, and then they decide, well, we want to try to get to school B, so they didn't enroll in school A, they're trying to get in school B. If they don't get in school B and it's past the September 20th date, then they're not enrolled in either one of them, and neither one of them is going to get, I mean, they're going to have to land somewhere, but they're not going to be counted in either one of the, so that's what I think that's what Representative Nguyen is asking, and if this is, do we need to give a buffer there somewhere to
Well, I would
make sure
think,
that doesn't happen?
okay, so let's back up for a minute. If you have to make a decision by August 1st, you have to determine how many students. It shouldn't take you until September 20th to notify students because you're going in order of application. So it should never be that case unless, and a parent should never just be hopeful that they're going to get in. They should know this is going to be something that's going to be advertised. They know that it's available to them. So I feel like it's going to be a rare situation in which somebody is going to try to do this. Maybe they just move it to Kansas and they want to go to a different district that they're not actually residing in, and they put an application in on September 15th, and they may or may not be admitted. But it comes back to, then they have to go to if they're not accepted, they have to go back to their resident school district, and that resident school district has to take them. So that's the buffer. Representative Wynn.
The representative understood the dilemma. It's not whether they take them, it's where the funding is.
Yes, but if somebody moves here from Colorado and they land in my home city, and they land there on October 1st, that school district's taking that child regardless of whether they receive the funding. And so and I'm just saying that's parallel to what we're talking about. And if a student or a parent fails to enroll their child in their resident school district in hopes that they were going to go to this other school district, and they were on this list and didn't get called up and didn't get the transfer, then that's on that parent for not doing, the backup. But I don't think I don't see a logical way to okay. We could do that. Okay, so we have an amendment with a friendly amendment on top of it. And we can actually amend that in a minute if we want, separate motion. Let's do that. Let's just, because I know what you're wanting to do, so why don't you make a separate motion after we finalize this one. Any other discussion? Representative Tarwater.
Madam Chair, the motion on the table, I think, is to pass the bill with the amendment, and if that works, then there's no going back.
It's not to pass it out yet, though, because it's not to pass out yet.
It's just to add the amendment? Okay.
Yeah, so we're okay. I called on you, and he still had an emotion, and so that's why we combined it. But we do have another motion from Representative Estes, and then we'll come back and do the Representative Hoffman motion. All right, any other questions? Further discussion? And Representative Hoffman, you can close on your amendment.
All right. Yeah, so this motion just takes it removes section 18, it removes sections 1 through 17. It just retains sections 19 through 25 with this balloon amendment that has been offered. So that I close on my amendment.
Okay, committee, you have heard the amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Back on the bill, Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so it would be page 16 of the balloon amendment, or probably page 16 of the also, but it would be changing the two balloons to September 10th instead of September 20th.
Do we have a second? Representative Tarwater for the second. Discussion. All right, you may close on your amendment.
I close.
Committee, all those in favor of changing the date from September 20th to September 10th, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Back on the bill, Representative Estes. Did you have
I think
a
the
meeting?
language I wanted to strike was struck on page 13 in the balloon amendment, lines 13 and 14.
Is that right? Nick, is that correct? Yes, it is.
Yeah, that is correct. That was an oversight on my part in not briefing that provision, and I was going to grab the chair's attention to make note of that. And committee, the language that Representative Estes is referring to is the language, if you remember, that was inserted that would have required when districts are adopting their policies on capacity, on how to determine the capacity, that districts have to allow any parent or person acting as a parent to speak at the public hearing. And that language in this amendment is being stricken. So it would be out.
All right, good to go. Thank you for noticing that, Representative Estes. All right, any further discussion on substitute for House Bill 2615? Representative Johnson?
Are there any amendments right now?
Nope.
Okay, I don't want to get in trouble today. Page 16, line 43, any student who is the dependent child of a current member of the United States Armed Forces, et cetera, is eligible for admission to the school district of such student's choice regardless of the capacity of the school district. So that introduces a section that means even that other school district, even if they have this policy we've set up, they get to go in there if their family member is on active duty orders, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody supports my military kids, and all of my grandkids could make use of this. But is that something we want in there if we're talking about a school? School has policy. I don't have room. Where am I going to put them? Are we forcing that when they should have other areas that they could go? Like if Fort Leavenworth, they can go to Leavenworth High School, but they'd rather go to Base or Linwood because we know they have better sports teams. Okay, just saying. So that's my question.
Is it a policy question, or more of a question for Nick?
For Nick, I'm not sure that we're being fair or equitable to school districts. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Nick, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to recap Representative Johnson's, the provision that he is looking at. This provision, yes, certainly would state that any dependent child of a current member of the United States Armed Forces would be automatically eligible for admission at any school district of that student's choice. So this provision would prevail for those students.
And I will follow up on that. We have had, I believe there were 28 other states that have open enrollment. Nick, do you happen to know off the top of your head if this is a common thread in other states that have open enrollment?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but we could certainly kind of look into that.
And Representative Johnson, anything else you want to add on that?
No, I understand it. And I'm not sure, I'm just thinking, I don't want to put undue hardships on a district that truly is over capacity and doesn't have any more room. Whereas everything else, they could deny them, but on this one, they don't have a choice. So it's something for us to think about. Thank you, I'm done.
Committee, you can weigh in. This is the time. Thoughts on that provision? Representative Tarwater?
I tend to agree with the representative that if it's full, it's full.
Would Representative Johnson or Representative Tarwater like to make a motion to strike that language?
I'll make the motion, Madam Chair.
All right, Representative Tarwater makes the motion to strike any language that's at the bottom of page 16, page 17 related to military being automatically allowed admittance or the transfer. Representative Johnson, did you want to second that? Okay, we do have a second. We are on discussion. Any further discussion? Representative Landwehr.
Exactly what lines are you omitting?
You can actually ask Nick to go through that. It's the bottom of page 16, I believe, line 43. And let Nick to tell us. Okay, yeah, I think it's just through 10. Is that correct?
Yep, so it'd be, you're striking out the language on page 15 in lines 42 and 43. And then, yes, on page, or on page 16, I'm sorry. Page 16, line 43, and then page 17, lines 1 through 10.
And I think I understand the intent. The intent is that if a military family does move into an area, they would always be accepted in their resident school district and be covered by their resident school district. But if it was after the September 10th deadline, then there would not be a carve-out provision. I think that was the intent. Is that correct, Representative Tarwater?
The intent was if there's no capacity, that they wouldn't be admitted.
Okay. All right, any further discussion? Representative Penn.
When you say no capacity, what exactly does that entail? I thought that we just discussed that the school district would have a buffer already to accommodate. Because it'd be my contention that those who are on active duty orders aren't in charge of their lives. They get directed to move at the behest of the Department of Defense. If they come into an area and their kids need to have schooling, I think the bill as written is supportive of that.
Representative Tarwater.
Madam Chair, yes, I agree with the representative. If a military family moves into a district, they must accept their kid, just like any other move into a district. This is if a district set their capacity and they're at their capacity in a grade level, this disallows any student from transferring that doesn't live in the district. The way it was worded before is except for if you were a military child, then you would be able to go to whatever school, no matter the capacity. And the intent wasn't to overload any schools. The intent was to help kids get to a better school that fits them better if there was capacity, and also help schools gain capacity where they could take it and get more funding.
And let's just remind everyone that Fort Leavenworth has the highest outcomes right now for math proficiency, I believe. Is that correct? Fort Leavenworth was at least in the top 2. Representative Estes?
Of senior math, correct?
All right. So all those in favor of the amendment, or actually you may close on the amendment.
I close.
All those in favor of the amendment, say aye. And opposed? Motion carries. All right, we're back on the base bill. Any other amendments, changes, discussion? All right, then. Representative Hoffman, you may close.
I close.
All right, committee on the House substitute for House Bill 2615. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. And those opposed? Motion carries. Committee, what is the will on House Bill, substitute House Bill 2662? Representative Hoffman.
I would move that we pass out House Bill 2662 favorable.
Is there a second? Second by Penn, and discussion. Committee, I do have an amendment for the Parents' Bill of Rights. If Nick will pass that out. And Nick, if you'd like to go ahead and explain the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee, so the first, this is the Parents' Bill of Rights and Transparency portal. So the First Amendment would appear on page 4, which is in the Transparency portal section, and this would require school district transparency portals to include the school's policies, procedures, and processes for suicide prevention, including the school district suicide awareness and prevention programming, training, and crisis plans that are required pursuant to the Jason Flatt Act that in current law. In addition, it would amend the library book designations and state that designations on and after July 1 of 2023 have to be made if an item is requested to be designated by the library, and also libraries on and after July 1 of 2023 would have to go through their new book purchases and books that they obtain to designate those new materials thereafter, on and after that date. Committee, in addition, the bill also, as you will recall, deals with the non-academic surveys, tests, questionnaires that are administered by school districts, and has that the provisions of that bill in there. And what this amendment would do is it would state first, it would conform in that subsection C what districts are supposed to be posting with regard to these test questionnaires, surveys, and examinations about values, beliefs, and practices on the transparency portal, and not have any dual requirements for posting of those. It would just be what is required to be posted on the transparency portal. Secondarily, the big balloon that you see on the back on page 9 would specify and clarify that the provisions of that section that prohibit the administration of any of those tests, questionnaires, surveys, and examinations without parental consent and without getting that notice and consent prior to the administration of that, that this would apply for any of those test surveys and questionnaires that are administered by any employee of a school district. So these would include administrators, teachers, counselors, social workers, psychologists, or school nurses. Then you see in that subsection G that if any school district, if any one of those school district employees becomes aware that a student may be at risk of suicide through credible reports from the student themselves, the student's peers, or the school staff, that this provision would state that the school personnel who are designated by the school to administer a suicide risk assessment or a suicide screening tool are authorized to administer that risk assessment or screening tool to that student. And that could include any employee that's designated by the school to administer those items. If a suicide risk assessment will be conducted or needs to be conducted, this balloon would state that the designated school personnel shall notify the parent or guardian before the administration of that risk assessment or screening tool and attempt to obtain the consent of the parent or guardian. But if they are unable to verbally notify the parent or guardian and obtain that consent after reasonable attempts to do so, the designated school personnel may administer the risk assessment or screening tool without such consent. And then if there is a suicide risk assessment or screening tool that is administered without parental consent, as soon as contact with the parent or guardian is made, that designated school personnel must notify the parent or guardian of the administration of that assessment or screening tool, and then also provide all information to the parent or guardian that was obtained from that risk assessment or screening.
All right, committee, that is my motion for House Bill 2662, and I can explain first or take a second. Second by Representative Penn. So I want to talk a little bit about this particular amendment and about this bill and the provisions of this bill related to the surveys and questionnaires. Test questions that are academic would never be included on the portal. So that's number one. I know there is a little bit of misinformation related to this, but that was never part of this bill. Questionnaires, surveys, anything related to social emotional learning, whether it's the curriculum or whether it's the surveys themselves, are implemented throughout many different settings in regular classes. And so those surveys, questionnaires, tests would need to be submitted to parents prior and approved by parents prior. Once that has been accomplished, then as long as it's within 4 months, then those surveys can be administered at any level, at any tier. Tier 1, which is a regular classroom. But what we do not want to do is, and since many times counselors and social workers are the ones administering the curriculums and the testing in the classrooms, what we don't want to do is provide any intensive intervention in that type of setting. But we don't want to prohibit it in the event that there is reasonable concern that there is a risk involved. So we want counselors or social workers or the appropriate person that's designated in their school district to be able to intervene and talk with a student and provide an assessment, and regardless of whether or not that parent is successfully contacted, as long as there is attempts to contact the parent and as long as immediately after they contact the parent and then provide the assessment tool. So that is why this provision is in here, is to allow what is currently happening in a situation where suicide is the crisis to continue, but with giving parents immediate access after the fact. That's not crystal clear, but I will stand for questions on that. Representative Penn.
Madam Chair, where it says in the balloon that the designated school personnel are supposed to reach out to the parent to verbally notify or a parent or guardian, and to obtain that consent with reasonable measure. And if they don't get in contact or don't obtain that consent, are those two paired together? Suppose they contact the parent, they don't obtain the consent, do they still administer? And then the second question I have is, do they document this anywhere for public record?
Well, hopefully they would document, and yes, they can administer the survey if they've made an attempt to contact the parent. I would also disclose that working on this language, I have talked to an individual that was concerned about counselors not being able to administer this type of risk assessment if they couldn't contact the parent. And so taking that in consideration in a situation where we really need to get information from a child, regardless of whether we agree or disagree on whether or not a survey is the best way to get information, we wanted to make that available to them. And if the parent can't be contacted, then yes, they can administer it, but they do need to follow up with the parent. I think the goal should always be, and this bill supports it, contact the parent. If a child is in crisis, contact the parent. Now, I will say that there should already be a suicide plan in every school building. They know who is supposed to intervene and what the policies are related to it. And if there is an imminent threat, then law enforcement is likely called. The relevant health officials or professionals are going to be called. So they're not going to wait. You do not need a survey or a test to know when someone's in imminent danger. And in those instances, this would not have a factor at all because they're going to make the call. They're going to call. They're going to do their protocol. This would be more secondary, that they have reports and they are trying to contact the parent, but they are not successful. They can still administer a survey in this type of situation as described here, as long as they make an attempt and then follow up with the parent after. Representative Penn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That allays a lot of my concerns. Thank you so much for that.
And if I didn't mention, a counselor that has been in the profession for a long time reviewed this and talked over why this might be important and helped with the language to make sure it was crafted in such a way that it would actually be applicable, usable. Any other discussion? All those I'll go ahead and close. I'll close. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And we are back on the bill, House Bill 2062. Yes, Representative Penn. And the vote is recorded. Representative Penn? All right, if there are no other amendments for the Parents' Bill of Rights, House Bill 2662, then I'll ask Representative Hoffman to close.
I would move House Bill 2662 as amended.
All right, the motion has been made and closure has been made, so all those in favor, say aye. Aye. And opposed? No. Motion carries. Okay, committee, we have successfully passed our minutes. We've successfully passed out 3 bills today.
May I please have my vote recorded on that
Yes,
as a no? Thank
Representative
you.
Hoy would like her vote recorded. And Representative Nguyen, and Representative, yes, Penn, and Representative Ousley, and Representative Byers. All right, so we've successfully passed out 3 bills, committee. We do not have any more action items for this committee. This could be the last time that I see you in this setting, unless we, yes, I know, it's exciting, unless we have to come back for any other work. So, special thanks to our staff that have been wonderful managing all our many amendments and our bills, and a special thank you to Holly, who has done an incredible job her first year. Yes. And I know. There's more to come. And Rachel, thank you for keeping everything online, and to our committee as well. We'll see each other on the floor. We are adjourned. Thank you, committee.